Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Morris. I'm the Vice Chair of Transportation Standing Committee, and our Chair is on the way. So we'll get started. He asked if we would just get started, and he'll join us as soon as he can. So I'll call the meeting to order and give the land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So next we'll go to the approval of the minutes of April 24th, 2025. Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Cuttle. Call for the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Clerk, are there any additions or deletions or modifications to the order of business?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the order of business? All those in favor? Those against? Motion carries. There is no business arising out of the minutes. Would anyone like to declare a conflict of interest? Seeing none. Moving on, there are no motions of reconsideration, no motions of rescission, no consideration of deferred business, and no notices of tabled matters. Clerk, is there any correspondence?
Correspondence has been received for items 13.12 and 13.13 and distributed to the Standing Committee.
Thank you. Do we have any petitions? No petitions. That brings us to 10.3 and a presentation from Jen Parker and Kitticle Mass Halifax. Thank you for joining us. You will have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and there will be an opportunity for questions of clarification afterwards. And just before your 10 minutes is up, you'll get a 30-second notification from our clerk.
Thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Jen. I'm one of the organizers of Kitticle Mass Halifax. And my co-organizer, Jillian, joined you for public participation last month to give you a bit of an introduction to Kitticle Mass and to invite you all to our ride, which took place on May 4th. We didn't see any of you there, so we're back with a bit more of a presentation this month. I want to get started with talking a little bit about who has or doesn't have access to cycling infrastructure in Canada. In a study published in June of last year, it's unfortunately not kids, and that's across Canada. And the study did include data from Halifax, and it was census data for a variety of Canadian cities. So even though kids here and across Canada don't have access to bike infrastructure, we do have a lot of kids and families that are interested in getting around by bike. And so that brings me to Kitticle Mass Halifax. We call ourselves a joyful protest. We are a team of 3 organizers with about a dozen regular volunteers and a large community of kids and families and other supportive adults. We exist and we do what we do because kids in Halifax don't have access to safe streets. And lots of folks who come to our rides don't ride regularly with their kids, except for on the trails, but they'd love for it to be safe enough to ride every day. Through our rides, we create the environment that we want to see for kids. We calm the streets by the volume of people on bikes and our volunteer ride marshals. They hold back drivers at intersections so kids can continue along the ride and enjoy the freedom of movement. We create space for like-minded grown-ups to find each other, build community, riding side by side. And we let kids know that cycling is a viable way to navigate our city streets and to build their confidence in riding and teach them that there are grown-ups in their community who care for their future. There's a growing demand for getting around by bike, and for lots of reasons: the climate crisis, the health benefits, and autonomy for kids. The numbers you see here are our total number of participants per season. This is our 4th season, and we've grown enormously since 2022. And based on the numbers we get at each ride, we are the largest critical mass community in Canada at this time. The numbers on the slide, as I said, are total participants for each year. There are folks across the country like us in Toronto, Hamilton, Ottawa, Edmonton, and now North Vancouver, and across the world that feel the same, that we need to plan for our kids. We know that they're making positive long-term habits by walking and cycling from a young age. These are some quotes from the grown-ups who participate and are a part of our community. Every year we collect feedback, and here's what they've said. They've gained awareness of the challenges of cycling with kids and also the confidence to ride more with their kids through our rides. They've taken our critical mass spirit back to their schools and communities. They've started bike buses to give their kids the opportunity to ride weekly or regularly with classmates and friends. And they're attending your active transport engagement sessions about cycling infrastructure. They're bringing their kids along, even though engagement sessions really aren't designed that way. We also get parents to share feedback from their kids. The kids love the autonomy that they get. They love seeing others like them. They love being part of the community, and they love taking over the street and the opportunity to be just like their grown-ups. So we want you to know a little bit more about the community that you're making decisions for when there's votes on things like the annual budget for active transport, or when there's compromises made to infrastructure in ways that won't improve the safety for kids. We're asking you to join us for a ride, hear from the community on those rides, and see who you're building a bike network for. And then we'd like you to build what you've promised, which is all ages and abilities. So we'll talk a little bit about that. There's guidance from NACTO around what all ages and abilities means. And in essence, the term all ages and abilities means that we're creating a cycling ecosystem designed to be accessible, safe, and comfortable for anyone to ride a bike. We've carefully included this, or someone has carefully included this in Halifax's integrated mobility plan, but the implementation is really lacking on the ground. This is a map of what should be Halifax's all ages and abilities cycling network. It includes both existing projects and planned. There are multi-use pathways, protected bike lanes, and local street bikeways. This is best case scenario, and some of it is 3 to 4 years off. And there are a lot of gaps. A lot of kids who don't have access to safe routes, and you can probably see many neighborhoods from your own districts without any cycling facilities, or very few. I understand that later today you're also going to have a staff presentation about the state of this bike network, and that it's late and over budget, but I want to tell you that it's also not what it's described as. It's not all ages and abilities. Being behind on construction is an opportunity to improve what's planned, to make it worth the money, and to prioritize routes that make it safe for children to move independently in their communities. So from our community, Critical Mass Halifax, these are the things that make Halifax's all ages and abilities facilities unsafe for kids. On local street bikeways, there's parking, vehicle volumes during peak times, and vehicle speeds off peak. In protected bike lanes, they kind of give up at the intersection. The 2-stage turn markings don't feel safe to have kids waiting in front of traffic to make a left-hand turn. There's parked cars in the unprotected sections, and there's a lack of connectivity. Multi-use pathways have a lack of connectivity as well, And although not unsafe, shared spaces are challenging when you have larger volumes of pedestrians. We've had a couple of critical mass families who were riding their kids to school together on Vernon Street once a week. And unfortunately, due to several cars passing the group of children too close, too fast, and far too often, those kids are no longer riding their bikes to and from school. So this is what we'd like to see to help improve our All Ages and Abilities bike network. We'd like metrics that measure and account for kids on our cycling network. We'd obviously like safer routes for kids and very quickly, but these are some possible steps to get us there. Our current bike counters are automated. They count bikes, but they don't give us any information about who is riding those bikes. But we continue to call our bikeways All Ages and Abilities. When preparing for this presentation, we had the opportunity to meet with Megan Winters and Karen Labrie from the city's Health and Active Transport Lab in BC, who let us know that demographic data is an indicator by some municipalities, like Victoria, BC, and that could be used here too. We'd also like to see a focus on including kids during the planning and design stages. So that might be something like public engagement sessions that welcome and facilitate kids' participation. And included in the references today is a How to Engage Kids in Street Design guide. And we'd also like to see more questions about cycling with kids on municipal surveys like Shape Your City, Road Safety Survey, and the Traveler Opinion Survey. This is my list of resources and references. It was circulated separately as well with links, so hopefully that's available and at your fingertips. Oh, and there was one more slide, but I'm not sure where it's gone. My last slide just says, come join us for a ride. Thanks for your time. Our next ride is in June in District 2 on the Eastern Shore. And we also have plans to ride in District 5, 7, 8, and 9 this year.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Does anyone have any questions? No questions for our speaker? Oh, Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and presenting to us today. It's very good information, and I appreciate that you've kind of highlighted for the local bikeways, the protected bikeways, the multi-use trails, like the specific challenges that you're witnessing, and I think that's very valuable information. I know we're embarking right now on doing a core active transit plan for Spryfield for many of the reasons that you mentioned. The infrastructure just doesn't exist for children or for people to travel safely. And we, whether it's our network of sidewalks or disconnects between our trails that exist, or many other reasons, lack of investment in sidewalks. It is an issue across the municipality, and I think every neighborhood and every community should be built to allow people to move around within it. And that that's key not only for building the cyclists for the future, but for addressing the needs today. I'm glad to hear that you're going to the Eastern Shore at your next ride, and I'm wondering what your plans are for the rest of the summer, and if you will be taking your program throughout the municipality, because I think it's a really wonderful idea, and if there's other ways that we can help promote that and get the people who are local in our own communities to come out and support your work, that would be good to know.
The way that we typically work is that we look for people from various communities who would like to lead or host a ride, and support them in the development of one of our events. And so that's why we're headed to the Eastern Shore, because we were connected with the folks from the Gatesbrook Greenway, so plan to ride with them. But if you know of anybody in your own districts who would like to organize a ride, we are certainly open to chatting with those folks and organizing a ride. We have some tentative plans, but we're happy to shift as as new opportunities present themselves.
Okay, and are you the key contact for that, or I just look at your references and resources? I'm just wondering who the key contact information is for. Yeah,
so there should be. I don't know if it, like when I submitted things, it came from our Critical Mass Halifax Gmail address. So that's the best way to get in touch with the three of us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If it's okay with the committee members, I'd like to ask a question from the chair. In your presentation, you mentioned the benefits of autonomy for young people using bikes, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that, because I think it's an underappreciated benefit in cities that are just trying to move towards better bike infrastructure. So, what have you experienced, or what do you know about the benefits for kids and teens who are able to bike their way around?
This is completely from my own experience because I wasn't prepared for this question, but I come actually at this from a background in child development. I work for the IWK, but my degree is in child studies, and I really am very concerned about my own son's autonomy and the autonomy of our kids. And as I became a parent, I was also worried about my own time and, wanting to have time to myself and not wanting to have to chauffeur my kid around places. So on a personal level, this is very much, how I came to this. I wasn't really much of a cyclist before critical mass. It's really, the benefits for kids of that independence and being able to get around on their own, being able to navigate going places with their friends so that parents aren't tied down to taking them everywhere. And so that they're, more engaged in their communities. The resource on engaging kids is about engaging kids in street design is also really about just engaging kids in democracy and in civics, really. So that's a big part of this for me as well.
Thank you very much. And oh, sorry, and Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, Jen. It's great. My question was about local street bikeway improvements. That's something that's been on my mind, and I just wondered maybe if you could describe a little bit more, maybe just about, you mentioned Vernon in particular, and then also other places that have different standards, or places that you've seen or know of, if you know of, other places that are doing local street bikeways better.
Megan Winters, her two things that she shared with us that are kind of on her mind right now are parking being a problem on local street bikeways. And so I use the Allen Oak Bikeway on a regular basis, and it's often, actually used it on a weekday the other day and realized that there wasn't cars parked on both sides, and that felt a lot better than on the weekends when there are cars parked on both sides. Because usually when I'm riding that with my son, it's the weekend and we have to worry about every parked car pulling away from the curb. And on Vernon Street, the issue with the bike bus there was just being regularly passed by vehicles too closely. So both the volume and the speed that vehicles are traveling. And that's another thing that Megan Winters was quick to point out, was that the volume of vehicles at peak times are things that we should be measuring and watching for, so that we're not basing, and I don't know what we're doing right now on this topic, so that we're not basing the volume of vehicles on a whole day measurement per se.
Okay, great. So she's in Victoria, might be somewhere to look to. Is that right? Okay.
In Vancouver, but the Victoria, BC is, it was their demographic measurements that we looked at.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, Ms. Parker, for coming. When I rode my bicycle in this morning and locked it up, I noticed an orange cargo bike, which I'm assuming is yours. No? What? I'm assuming you parked out there. I did. I have a blue cargo bike. You have a blue one? Well, there's an orange one and a blue one. So there we go. You're the orange. I love it. I don't have a cargo bike. Cargo bikes weren't a thing when my kids were little. They're 19 and 25 now. My 25-year-old just got his license a couple of months ago, and he doesn't have access to we have one vehicle. My wife has it today. And he had to ride his bike to the hospital where he works. And he's fine doing that. I grew up in Brampton, Ontario, and then Markham, and then Scarborough, and rode all around Toronto. And when you speak of autonomy, being 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, having that hand-me-down BMX, getting on the road, getting on the sidewalk, being able to go wherever you wanted to go. Now, at that time, Brampton was 155,000 people, and it was a lot easier to get around. So I appreciate the lack of infrastructure that we have now that is family-friendly, child-friendly. When we rode around with my kids, which started in a bike trailer and then I'd tag along, and then they were on their own bikes. And for much of that, they rode on the sidewalk while I rode beside them on the road, just because you never know what can happen with kids on bikes. And so that for me is a huge part of this, and why I'm glad groups like yours are doing what they're doing. Critical Mass, all of the groups that are out there raising awareness of this. So in that vein, I appreciate you coming here, and I will have a motion when council's finished asking questions. And I don't see anyone else on the board, so Madam Vice Chair, if it's okay with the committee, I'll read out the motion now in response to this presentation with some suggestions from staff to make it kind of general but also specific to what your requests are. So I move that the Transportation Standing Committee request a staff report to identify opportunities to incorporate indicators on young people in active transportation, that is, where, when, and how they are cycling, into the monitoring and evaluation programs being considered as part of the Integrated Mobility Plan and any other relevant plans and programs. The report should also respond to the requests of the Critical Mass presentation at TSC on May 22nd, 2025, including suggestions of using intercept surveys with kids and their families using bikeways, ride-along audits with kids and their families, and screen line counts that include perceived demographic data to measure who is using the AAA cycling facilities, which include counting children on their bikes separately from parents' bikes, and counting and other things like counting in automated counter locations near kid-focused destinations, for example, parks, playgrounds, schools, libraries, community centers, rec facilities, etc. The staff report should also address the planning and design stages of our AAA cycling infrastructure, with an emphasis on public engagement that welcomes and facilitates children's participation, as well as questions about cycling with children in municipal surveys, surveys, for example, Shape Your City, Road Safety Survey, Traveler Opinion Survey, etc.
Is there a second? It's a long
a very
motion. Is there a
long
second?
Our clerk should have it on the screen for folks. Essentially, being general, as I mentioned, was staff's advice, and then also incorporating the requests that were in the presentation from the presenter. Thank you, Councillor Cuddle, for the second. I don't think we really need to, well, I'm not going to debate it very much. I think the presentation kind of speaks for itself, and our own thoughts and feelings on cycling infrastructure here in Halifax brings our own experiences to this. So I've said all I need to say on it.
Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you very much. So, I think looking at the users of our cycling lane is a good exercise to do. My concern is in the count, is that we've seen this in other things, where if people aren't counted, then like you're saying, oh, well, children don't use the bike lanes, so we don't need to plan for them. There are no children on them. And that becomes, a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where people don't use that bus, so therefore the bus, no one wants to use that bus, which isn't true. It's like, well, maybe people aren't using that bus, or kids aren't riding in that bike lane because it's not working for them. And so I just want to be aware that if this motion passes and we do these counts, it's really with the lens and the aim of trying to understand what would get more kids on the bike lanes, not to confirm whether kids use it or not. And I think that's a really important kind of qualifier for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There's no one else on the board. Someone wants to call the question. Question is called. All in favor? All opposed? That carries. Thank you. All right, Ms. Clerk. Next, we would have Kevin Wilson, 10.3.2, HRM parking fees and established parking benefit district. Just quick explanation for committee. I want to thank Councillor Morris for stepping in. I had mixed up our May and June. Next month, we are starting at 1:30, not today. So apologize to all. Floor is yours, Kevin, as soon as Ms. Clerk has you set up. and you'll have 10 minutes.
Hi, I'm Kevin, and this is HFX by Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike. Except sometimes I try to fix curbside parking so that I can just have nicer streets. I made a video last year about the popular belief that there's nowhere to park in Halifax, and took a midday tour around downtown Halifax to see for myself. I managed to find thousands of spaces all over the place, and that got me thinking, it's not the total number of spaces, maybe there's a particular type of parking that people want that they can't find. There are 3 places to park a car: your property, someone else's, or on public property. People don't generally complain about the lack of parking on their own property because they can broadly control where they live and how much parking they need to begin with. Parking on someone else's property downtown mostly takes the form of parkades, where drivers can pay to store their cars for however long they want in a central location. These don't really have capacity issues, since owners can just increase the parking rates until there's always a space available. And ultimately, if it's profitable enough, people will just build more parkades. That leaves public property, which mostly takes the form of on-street parking. When I made my video last year, the headline result of my parking tour downtown was that there was plenty of spots in general, but street spaces were more hit and miss during peak hours. It's totally plausible that you could look for street parking on a specific block and not find it. There are 2 reasons why we pay for street parking. The first being to raise revenue for the city. This is the least important reason, but it's the one that everyone focuses on. We could donate all the money to charity or set it on fire, and it would be just as important to right-price spaces. The real reason that we pay for street parking is to exclude other people from using the space that we want to use when we want to use it. The more people that want to park in a place at a specific time, the higher the price needs to be to guarantee that that space is available. When you can't find a space, it's because the price was too low for that level of demand. Whereas privately operated parkades have an incentive to set prices that reflect on the level of demand, street parking is managed by the city and does not share that incentive. The core issue is that street parking prices, while not completely arbitrary, are heavily influenced by public opinion rather than the level of demand. For a good example of this, you only have to look back about a year. Faced with a small budget deficit and not wanting to raise property taxes, the Halifax Regional Council floated the idea of charging for parking on evenings and weekends, something that's already the case for private parkades. Residents and business owners pushed back, citing the public perception that there's nowhere to park downtown, and street parking remained free and dysfunctional. You can see this more clearly by plotting out the costs of parking over the course of a week. Here are the cumulative costs of parking in 2 downtown parkades without monthly passes, but taking into account the daily maximums. Here's the minimum and maximum costs of metered parking across the city. Parking in public spaces for most of the city is discounted by almost 20 to 30%, despite being the more convenient option. Only 1 meter zone in the city has similar costs to private parkades downtown, and it's actually not downtown, it's the area surrounding the hospitals. Speaking of the hospitals, they seem to be caught in the same trap as the city. Here's the parking at Victoria General Lot, just off of downtown. It's almost half the price of either street parking or private parking in the surrounding area, and as a result, here's what the lot looks like in the middle of the day. This same pattern shows up for longer-term permit parking. Here are the costs of monthly passes at the same 2 private parkades downtown. And here are the costs for commuter and residential permits in the same neighborhoods. Whenever the price of parking is publicly managed, the price gets set too low to effectively manage scarce spaces. The situation isn't unique to Halifax. In 2008, the city of Chicago was broke. In a bid to stave off tax increases, the city sold off the rights to its parking meter revenue for 75 years to a group of private investors for $1.16 billion. The investors promptly raised the rates for parking to the market clearing price, and just 15 years later have already recouped the initial investment, plus $500 million on top of it, with a full 60 years left on the contract. So city governments are trapped. Underpriced street parking creates the perception that there's nowhere to park, and any attempt to increase parking rates are blocked on the grounds that there's the perception that there's nowhere to park. Is there a way to fix this? In the case of Chicago, parking rates were allowed to increase to meet the level of demand, but only after the city government had sold off the rights to the revenue to private interests. One approach that would allow for better management of street parking while keeping the revenue generated local would be to implement what are known as parking benefits districts. The basic concept is that neighborhoods would be able to form benefits districts. Within the district, the neighborhood would be responsible for managing on-street parking. To compensate for this responsibility, they would receive a share of the parking revenue within the district, let's say 50-50 split with the city as an example. The revenue from on-street parking within the district could then be used to fund projects within the same neighborhood, based on the priorities of the people living there. Projects would need to be planned out in advance with the city, but could hypothetically include things like better sidewalk and tree maintenance, better snow clearing on sidewalks, art installations, graffiti removal, better bus shelters, neighborhood Wi-Fi, or even more ambitious projects like burying power lines. You're probably already thinking of the kinds of things you'd like to see in your neighborhood, and that's kind of the point. The ability to use revenue generated from parking in the district on neighborhood amenities gives an incentive to have parking rates that reflect the actual level of demand in the area. If a district undercharges for parking, they're essentially defunding their own projects in order to give free or discounted parking to strangers. If they overcharge, then people will stop parking there, and again, they've just defunded their own projects. Here's an example. Let's take a part of the city with really high demand for street parking. This is the Schmidtville Heritage District, and people would like to park here so they can go shop on Spring Garden Road. Commuters would like to park here so they can go to the hospital a few blocks away, and residents would like to park here because some of the properties actually don't have their own parking spaces. In a hypothetical Schmidtville parking benefits district, let's say there are 100 curbside spaces in total. The district could decide how many spaces to allocate between metered and permit spaces. The price of any metered spaces can be set at whatever price they think is appropriate. Their incentive, of course, is to pick a price that's high enough that people can reliably find parking, but not so high that they lose out on revenue. The price of any permit spaces can be set using what's called a single price auction. Say, for instance, 20 of the spots are designated for permits. The 20 permits would go up for auction every month or year, and people can enter a bid for how much they're willing to pay for that spot. Let's say 50 people enter a bid. The spots would go to the people who place the 20 highest bids, but each of them would only pay the price of the 20th highest bid. At that point, each of the main street parking types is priced based on demand in the same way that a parkade is. The more people that want to park there, the higher the rate goes. Drivers would get more reliable parking, neighborhoods would get better streets, and the city government would probably net get more revenue than it currently does, even after splitting it with neighborhoods. When the city wants to remove parking spaces by installing things like bus or bike lanes, it can just compensate the benefits district based on whatever terms are laid out when it was first established. For example, giving 5, 10, or however many years of expected revenue to the district in exchange for losing those spaces. This stops fights over public infrastructure from being turned into drawn-out culture war battles over a handful of parking spaces with nebulous, uncertain value. The value of the lost spaces is reflected in the total revenue that they generate, and that's it. To be clear, there's nothing stopping city governments from implementing this kind of demand-based pricing themselves. The usefulness of parking benefits district is that it creates a group of stakeholders who benefit from parking being priced at the rate that actually reflects demand, and who are less likely to be sympathetic to pleas for free or discounted parking. I plugged it in the video that I made last year, but if you want to learn more about parking benefits districts, I highly recommend checking out Donald Shoup's The High Cost of Free Parking. And if you're interested in this topic more generally, you should check out the work of the Parking Reform Network, link in the description. That's it for this one. Let me know in the comments if you think something like a parking benefits district could work in your neighborhood and what kind of projects you'd like to see the funds used for. If you find this kind of thing interesting, be sure to drop a like on the episode and subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Hang on.
Yes, you still have time left if you want to supplement the video.
That's essentially it. I just wanted to make the case that we could probably use our on-street parking resources more efficiently and probably make our neighborhoods a bit nicer. And that's one approach to doing so that we can kind of get through the deadlock that we experienced back in 2023 and probably are going to have on an ongoing basis. If there's any questions, I can answer them, but that's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cleary, you're up first.
Thank you. This is one of the third rails of municipal government, as we discovered a couple of years ago. So there's a couple of things. I love the idea. I would love to actually charge for street parking everywhere, in every part of the municipality. I have a feeling, I'm looking at a colleague across the way who's looking down, avoiding eye contact with me, that she would not agree with me. However, even where we have it, so let's just take the example and say, okay, where demand is very high and people are used to it, moving to these kind of benefit districts means that the money that we're already collecting from parking revenue will have to go to that other thing. So then we have to make up the missing revenue that we're currently getting. So then we have to raise taxes. And that's fine. I mean, there's a transition of a few million that you would have to deal with over several years. But I think even if it wasn't 100%, even if you gave the community 80% or whatever, so that there was still in that transition some coming back. Have you thought about the transition, that process for governments to basically displace some revenue that they have to make up for some other ways? Otherwise, they have to cut something in order to make up that, to give it to the community.
So in the basic sense, you technically don't have to do the benefits district part of it. You could do that kind of market-based pricing just right now on your own. But the benefit politically is that it kind of offloads the, oh, why is parking so expensive in Schmidtville? Well, that's how they set the prices in Schmidtville. So, that's not our domain. In terms of the actual transition costs, I think the idea would be to do a more gradual rollout. So instead of doing kind of, hey, we're transitioning everything in 2026 over to parking benefits districts, everywhere is a parking benefits district, good luck everyone. It would sort of be wind up a parking benefits district in Schmidtville, and then, if that pilot goes well, wind one up in another section of downtown, wind one up in Dartmouth. And then as you kind of get a sense of how well they work in the city, just let them give a little bit more space for communities to form their own benefits districts. And then that gives you, a decade or so to kind of plan that out.
Which wouldn't preclude a city from increasing and moving much more to a market and demand-based pricing model, and then whatever additional could go into something in that transition as well.
Yeah.
Just for yours and maybe the committee's benefit, former head of Public Works and Transportation, we used to call it Transportation Public Works here. I visited him a few months back in Niagara-on-the-Lake, where he's the acting CAO. And their budget, very small community, but they have the Shaw Festival. They have a lot of other things that especially a lot of Americans come up to enjoy. 5% of their budget is parking. Their parking is $5, $6, and $7 an hour from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. I was in awe when I was paying for parking there. But thank you, Kevin. I appreciate this presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. If no one objects, I have just a question from the chair. It's a good video. As I kind of understand the kind of crux of your thesis, ultimately you're kind of trying to solve a political problem, really, by creating a lobby that exists for demand-based parking, and incentive that's not just, well, the city coffers get some extra money, which is pretty much a hard sell for anybody to get behind. I'm wondering just if in your research there, and if you have any thoughts to, because when I think about it, the strongest kind of lobby to not pay more on parking isn't necessarily the resident on the street. It's the person driving in from, out in the suburbs. And whether they're paying into a parking district or whether it's paying to the city, they're still going to hate paying more for parking. So I'm just wondering, is the political piece maybe overstated? Or is there examples of how to manage that conflict that come out of these?
There have been some mechanisms put in place. The kind of the main advantage is that it deflects the decision authority. You do kind of gain the ability of saying, it's not us setting the prices, it's the people, it's the good people in Schmidtville, or it's the good people in downtown Dartmouth. One thing that I've seen done is that they near where you would pay for parking at one of the parking meters, they will actually sometimes put up little stands that say improvements to this neighborhood funded by your, I don't know how they phrase it, essentially your parking fees help keep our sidewalks nice, or something to that effect. And that can kind of help deflect it, as opposed to the money going nebulously into the city coffers, as you say. It's no, in a very concrete way, this helps keep snow off our sidewalks. It makes the trees better maintained.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, the other piece around that is being, kind of the pushback around the parking isn't just being the drivers, it's also being, the businesses, and knowing that businesses want to attract customers, and a lot of that is ease and convenience, which people do have out in the big box stores versus in our downtown. And, it's price is one part, the other part is encouraging, price as an incentive to encourage turnover. So, I mean, there's many ways to look at this through many lenses. I think, understanding in terms of district benefit, the business improvement districts have been asking for a long time for some of the parking revenue to come directly back to the districts to be reinvested there. But parking can be a complicated topic. So greatly appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see anyone else on the board, so thank you very much for your presentation to us today. So next up, we have public participation. Ms. Clerk, I see that we have 3 registered speakers, so I'll just go ahead and call them forward now. So the first speaker on the list would be Peggy Cameron. And then after that would be Howard Epstein, who I'll take the moment to recognize as a former councillor from Halifax back in the day and a former MLA. And then after that would be Angie Herman. So whenever you're ready, Ms. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm not sure, did you receive a printed copy of the buildings that I'm speaking about? Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm speaking about the proposed widening for the transportation corridor on Robie Street. Some of you will have heard my position before, but this is to update you after we hosted a public panel last week on the 7th where we had well over 100 people attending, and it was motivated on my part because despite staff assuring councillors that there's been robust public consultation, many people are not aware of this and they're not really fully informed, and so it was an opportunity to just kind of say this is the lay of the land as we see it. And again, the information that we've received has only been through Freedom of Information. We haven't received anything that substantively shows what the public is going to be having done to our neighborhood. And so I think that that's a place where we really need to think. If we're having robust public consultation, how is it on the day off or the day before or days leading up to the public panel? No one knows about this on my street in that district that's really impacted. I would say coming out off the public hearing, or the public panel rather, this is not something that can go forward. I think it really is a moment to push pause and to think about what are the objectives of really undertaking a modal shift in the city, and to understand that it's not sustainable for this city to be engaging in doing segmented shifts for bus rapid transit, very future-based, at a cost of about $190 million per kilometer, which is what this is looking at now. And probably in short order, by next year, you'll find it'll be $200 million. And that's not really even for bus rapid transit. That's just for the widening, to have a uniform width of Robie Street from Kennard to Robie, or Kennard to Yonge. I'd like to say as well that the specific area that we're talking about is not that entire segment. It's only between North Street and Kennard. And as you can see from looking at the buildings, there's multiple buildings that have extreme importance to a neighborhood that planners had no understanding of when they decided that they would widen Robie Street. there's at least 10 to 12 buildings. We're not sure, but when I walk around that neighborhood, I see that could be 60, 70, 75 homes. I'm not calling them units. I'm not calling them properties. They're places where people lived. And what I would ask you as counselors at this point is to have a rethink and repopulate those buildings. I'm essentially living in a ghost town now as you're buying these properties in the middle of a housing crisis and affordability crisis, as we see people filling up the parks again because of the season being more amenable to being intense. This is not something this city can afford to do. And the way that you have heard a disregard for the trees in that area, that they're at the end of their life, that we can replace them, that we'll plant more trees. That again, it's not just an economical problem, it's a sustainable problem. It's disregarding the impact of trees that have been there since 1860, 1870 on maps that have a huge value for slowing traffic, for giving beauty to the public realm, and for all of the things that I think we have about a $23 million budget for climate, and yet we would ignore what the value of these trees are. I would say that bus rapid transit was adopted as something that's extremely flexible. I think when we give our chance to our staff that your job is to make sure they understand there are constraints to what the city can afford or will do, and there's many ways, flexible ways. That's why it's popular to be able to reconfigure a short distance between North Street to Kennard and have a priority for transit or light rail transit. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. So the next up would be Howard Epstein.
Thank you very much, Councillor Austin and members of the committee. You will have heard from both Peggy Cameron and myself on previous occasions about this particular issue of the proposed widening of a segment of Robie Street. Ms. Cameron and I both happen to own homes that are on streets that are immediately adjacent, and we've taken an interest in this proposal. Indeed, the idea of the widening of much of Robie Street, including this section, goes back to 1994 at least, which is when I was on council, the first class council of the city of Halifax, because at that time the traffic engineers were talking about it, and it included my district included that area, and I wasn't having any of it. I thought that it didn't make sense then, and I don't think it makes sense now. What we're really asking you to do is to refrain from going ahead with this. We're not asking you to invest money in it. We're asking you to not invest money in it. There are now properties that have been vacated because the tenants have been evicted. We're asking you to not to demolish them. We're asking you to seek new tenants for those buildings. We're asking you not to cut down the trees, and we're asking you not to go ahead with the proposal that would expand this section of Robie Street from 3 lanes to 4 lanes. So essentially, we're asking you to refrain. And I want to be clear that even though at an earlier stage of council's deliberation, not this council, but earlier councils, there was a designation of this part of Robie Street as a transportation corridor. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go ahead and widen it. The fact that official plan documents designate something as a transportation corridor, or indeed include any other proposed undertakings, doesn't oblige you to go ahead with it. It certainly doesn't oblige you to spend money. You, of course, are equipped, I think, today with a solicitor, and there's a legal department, but I would direct your attention to Section 232, subsection 2 of the HRM Charter, which is explicit that the inclusion of projects in planning documents, meaning things like the MPS, does not oblige council to go ahead with it. And there are many reasons why council might refrain from doing that. Council could have undergone an election and there may be new councillors. Council may decide that it wants to rethink the project. Council may consider that there are less expensive alternatives. Council may wish to consult the public again about this. There are many good reasons why it is that a council might refrain, but you're not obliged to go ahead with it simply because at an earlier stage a previous council decided to designate something in a particular way. So this has a very focused and apposite application to what it is we're asking you to do, which is, in this case, essentially not to spend the money that is going to be required and to go ahead with this project, or indeed to take steps like demolishing buildings or cutting down trees. That this is not required, and in this case is extremely unwise because there are alternatives available. The reason that we've come again to this committee to flag this issue is because we have experienced two things since the last time we spoke. One was that we got additional information about the likely cost, which has now grown to be almost $200 million. And the other is we organized 2 weeks ago a public meeting in the neighborhood about this, and there was a big turnout, as Ms. Cameron mentioned a moment ago, and it was clear that the sentiment of the public was very strongly against going ahead with this proposal as now configured. And these were people who all live in the immediate neighborhood. So that's what's prompted us to come again to talk with you. So again, we're essentially asking you to refrain from taking any active steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So next up would be, so actually we do have a question on the board. I'm going to look to the solicitor and the clerk, because typically public participation, we don't do questions, has always been my understanding. Okay, so question of clarification, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm very sympathetic towards this. I'm wondering if you've reached out to the entity Link Nova Scotia to share correspondence with them, ask questions. Several of the properties have been bought by the province for this corridor for bus rapid transit. So I'm just wondering if you've been able to ascertain their role in this big project and their agreement that this is what they have in their final analysis of how they're going to improve transportation in and around the municipality.
Yes, indeed. We met and chatted with Minister Outfit to talk about this, and what emerged from this discussion was that although the province put the money forward in order to make this purchase, essentially their view is that they did it in response to requests from HRM, and that it wasn't necessarily their own specific initiative. It was to accommodate the municipality that, by whatever mechanism, identified this as an appropriate way for the province to spend some money to help out HRM. I'm not sure if the municipality is expected to pay this money back. I didn't get that information, but the province takes the view that it was HRM's project and that they were just fronting the money.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for your presentation. So next up is Angie Herman.
Something I need to press, or is it working? Good. Okay. Hi. I don't have anything prepared. I'm just going to speak from the heart. I did send a letter that kind of got into a lot of the details that I hope you've had a chance to read. And if not, I can be sure to get it to you. I am one of the owners of Casino Taxi. So we are a third-generation family business. Casino Taxi is almost 100 years old, and in fact, it will be in a couple of years if it survives. I'm coming to you because there is a proposal in place to raise rates by 12.5%. And actually, this review and this proposal is happening because a year ago in the summer, I came to Bylaw asking for help. And I think the example of how it has taken almost a year to get to this point today would explain why council is not in the position, or the city is not in the position, to be regulating prices. So I do think that taxi and rideshare should be regulated for safety and for customer experience. I think that's really important, and I don't think that rideshare is being appropriately regulated for those things. But for pricing, the methodologies that are used are so simplistic, and they have nothing to do with the way that technology works today or the way that customers want to pay today. The city used to be zoned, but now it is a big, sprawling, on-zone city. So when you take things like massive 12.5% and you extrapolate them, I live in Westwood Hills in Tantallon. My neighbors want to support me, but if we use the meter, a taxi driver would be happy to do a ride like that for $45. It would help them tremendously. They would love it. But we have to go by the meter. We can't compete. It's like buying toilet paper on volume. It doesn't make sense to have kilometers be equal. Everything is done in such a simplistic way. We have the tools and we have the resources. We have the insight. We are no different than Uber. People think that rideshare is different than taxi, but in Halifax, there are no companies that own hundreds of taxis. We are identical in every way. So it is one driver driving their own personal family car who chooses to work with a company whenever they want and get rides. We are in the unique position where we can look at the traveling public and we can make sure that our rates are ones that will get rides for our drivers, and our drivers are our customers. And if we don't have rides, they won't be coming to us. So everything that we do is going to be in the best interest of the entire market. We are not an American company that seeks to only have profits for an end result and really doesn't care what they decimate in the meantime. We have 24 employees who we pay high living wages with benefits that are in our dispatch office. We have 350 drivers, the majority which are not gig or part-time, but do it full-time. We have a wait list of over 100 drivers that drive for Uber that are asking us, calling us all the time to say, can we come? Because we cannot live on rideshare gig wages. I can't take one driver because if I don't have the rides for that driver to be able to sustain his family, or if I take that driver and then it dilutes all my other drivers' earnings, that doesn't work. We are hurting desperately. I don't think by doing these changes, it's going to be some blanket solution, because I think Uber is a machine that is so well funded in marketing and all those things, but it will give us a chance. Everything that we are trying to do will be timely. City Council has changed prices in taxi. This would be the second time in 13 years. How is that even remotely reasonable? Uber changes prices every 5 minutes, and they change it based on who you are and the customer. People have proven they're not actually rate sensitive, because over 70% of the rides in the rideshare market many of them are on surge. You can go out to dinner and you can pay a price generally similar to taxi, and then you can come home and pay double. And 70% of people are choosing that. I know I'm coming to the end of my time. I am here for if any questions you have or expertise. I think the city has staff that all the time can focus on compliance and licensing, and that makes sense. But there is no expertise on pricing, and doing something like CPI or doing a jurisdictional scan where actually you're just in a self-closed loop where everybody's doing the same thing. Halifax raised it. Hamilton will too. It's broken. It's not relevant. We have the expertise. We have the heart. We care about the whole industry. We care about the traveling public and the drivers. And we have the ability to do things in a nuanced, slow, appropriate way. I'm not saying drivers do not deserve a raise in their prices. It just makes sense to do it in a way that is balanced so that shorter fares are appropriately compensated for, and longer runs that anybody would be happy to do can be competitive. And that is the way that we can make it sustainable. And as a final point, in 5 years, we have been decimated. In 2 to 3 more years, or if this takes a whole another year process to see if you'll let me for 1 year just try to set my own rates, the impact can be so dramatic. And I want you to remember that there are many seniors who use taxi who do not have access to apps, and there are many lower income people who don't have access to credit. Just wanted to say you're protecting your people by protecting this industry and by protecting competition, because there won't be competition soon if it stays as it is.
Thank you for that. We do have some questions of clarification. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming in and sharing this. I don't take taxis or Ubers very often. I ride and walk most places, but I do have the casino app on my phone. I do have the Uber app on my phone. And I do notice price differentials up either way, actually. So my question is around the employees that you have and the taxi drivers who I assume are not employees in the legal sense. I know with Uber, for example, a number of statistics have come around that, on average, they make about $10 an hour, which is obviously below the minimum wage. And so the report that we're going to be debating later speaks to the vast majority of drivers who participate in the survey want the rate increase, but they're thinking about it not from the broker or the business's point of view, they're thinking about it from theirs. So I'm assuming they're thinking about that I will make more money. So how do you sort of square that circle? And I'm not a huge fan of governments regulating prices of anything. And in fact, I've said this many times over the last several years, and I said it in the media just recently. We don't regulate the price of pizza. I'm not sure why we regulate the price of a drive. But cities all around the world seem to do this, which baffles me. But we don't regulate the price of TNCs. Oh, I've lost my microphone. I'm starting to see less and less of a difference, especially if you look at the casino app and the way you can pay and how you book the ride. It is, from a user's point of view, indistinguishable really from Uber. So can you help us, in the report where it says the vast majority of drivers want the rate increase, but as a company you don't. So how would you suggest, do you see a value in any increase as a standard, or simply turn it over to the companies and the drivers and say, have at her, charge whatever you want? Like what if you had your druthers, what would you be choosing here?
I do think that drivers deserve to be compensated. And I don't think that anybody thinks it's reasonable with the changes in gas and the changes in insurance and everything else that they would twice in 13 years get a raise. What I am saying is that this proposal is too simplistic. And of course, if you ask anyone who's hurting, would you like 12.5% more? Because that is the simple question that was asked. Of course, if the answer is yes or no, why would you not say yes? But what I am saying is that the way that you can change rates, the majority of our rides are not the average 33 that is plotted in this report, $33. The average of our rides are $15. You could put small amounts of, 50 cents on something, small that is done frequently, and it would benefit the drivers. But if you put a large amount on, people will go to Uber, and getting 12.5% more, but having dramatically less rides is not going to give them more money in their pocket at the end of the day. It will hurt them, and people will choose when they open. You're right, our apps are basically identical, and people can open both. And on a regular basis, if ours are so outrageous for where the majority of people live, we're talking Larry Utech, we're talking, Clayton Park or Cole Harbor or Sackville or Tantallon like I do. It's not in the city. And in fact, Uber is often more expensive in the city, and it's more expensive when it's surging. So what I am saying is that thought and care will go into the way that we calculate our rates. We have the mechanism to do tiered pricing in our, equipment, where the first 0 to 2 or 0 to 5 kilometers can be a rate that makes sure that drivers are taken care of and that they're being compensated. And that if somebody travels a short rate, they're going to pay more in that. And that's fair. And it's not going to be dramatic or hard for the person because it's a pretty short ride. But then if it becomes a long ride, then the rate after 5 kilometers would be much lower. Just the same as if you buy a value pack of anything, it becomes lower. So I believe you can make more money as a driver by having smaller amounts on but on the majority of rides, and then being able to win some of these longer rides where a lot of our community lives, and be able to compete and get those $30, $40 rides. But nobody's going to choose it if Uber is going to do it for $5 or $6 or $10 less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you for coming and speaking with us here today. This was a question after reading the report. My question for later in the day is how competitive is this with other ride share models like Uber, and does it give an advantage to one over the other? That was my primary concern in what we're about to do. So Councillor Cleary, asked you what you would like to see, and it is a more complex model. And I agree 100%. Like, we can't be sitting here setting rates in a field that's so dynamic and competitive right now, that if we're kind of hobbling our local taxi drivers from winning, basically it's winning rides now, we will see the loss of our local taxi companies. And I think I never, by the way, take Ubers. I always take Casino. I love your app. I'm getting all my friends on board.
Councillor, if we could get to
local.
a question.
So,
Councillor Cuddle.
Back to somebody else seemed to get 5 minutes.
I know, and if we continue on this pace, we'll be here until 5.
Be here, and everybody should get the opportunity then. But
Councillor,
my question is, back to where you would like to see, what you would like to see happen next. Your next step. Would you like to see a supplemental report? Could we give a raise now and work on this new model? Because you did say that drivers do deserve a raise. So I'm just trying to think, what are the exact next steps here? Should we move ahead with the new rates, or should we hold off and ask for a staff report on alternative models to council setting rates?
What I would say is that I do think that immediately drivers deserve a better raise. You should probably approve this if you will not give me, and all licensed brokers, which the city has now regulated, licensed brokers are different than independents. So let us, as a pilot project, just 1 year, what's the harm in this? You can't really do a staff report because Uber has charged in like a bull. Nobody has caught up. I'm asking for something that I'm saying, please change from what's been happening for 100 years. There's no difference. There is no competitive or ethical reason why you would allow any TNC to set its rates and not allow me to. So in that the city has to do things, let's do the study. The study is me tomorrow doing for 1 year, and any other, I'm not trying to say just Casino Taxi, I'm saying any licensed provider, let us put that rate increase in. And if this public doesn't freak out about our rates, then you could consider that a success. The measure of success is, are you getting, backlash from the city?
Okay, so I think I understand the kind of the path forward, that yes, go ahead, approve the rates, because the taxi drivers deserve a raise, but at the same time immediately start looking at alternatives to us setting the rate and working with the service deliverers on this.
12.5% rate increase, and that hits the media, and they put it.
Okay.
I'm
so don't do the rate increase. So I'm just trying to figure out how do we deal with these two things at the same time?
How you could deal with them at the same time would be permitting the rate to go through, but at the exact same time permitting a pilot study, so that way the media story could be, these are the rates, except licensed brokers may differentiate from these rates under a 1-year pilot study.
Okay, given this is all regulated by bylaw, I'm not
Your
sure
time
the
is
path,
up, Councillor.
But I will ask about the path. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. There's no one else on the board, so thank you for... Right, yes. So thank you very much for your presentation today. So now I will call 3 times for anyone else who would like to address us today. So would anyone else like to speak? Please come forward. Name and community for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Hello. Hi, all. My name is Anne, and I'm here today on behalf of the Halifax Cycling Coalition. Thank you for your continued interest in biking infrastructure in the city. I am here today to deliver a response to the Regional Center AAA Bikeway Network Delivery Information Report. As you may already be aware, the Halifax Cycling Coalition, HCC, has prepared a response to this report and submitted it to the committee. If you have not already read it, please do. The proposed bikeway network from the Integrated Mobility Plan, which was unanimously agreed upon by Council in 2017, has several goals. The goals I personally am most interested in are increasing safety for vulnerable road users and reducing car reliance in our city. There's an urgency to both of these goals. The longer the delay on improved biking infrastructure, the more people are injured or killed due to vehicle on cyclist collisions, and the greater emissions are from the cars on the road. The report lists financial costs, but any discussion of total costs should include the offsets that a well-structured biking network provides by such things as improving public health due to increased safety and physical exercise and lower air and noise pollution, efficiencies realized by reducing vehicular congestion, and reduced road maintenance costs. Further, the mention of costs in this report completely ignores the costs in terms of lives lost and or injuries and traumas suffered by people cycling on our streets due to a lack of safe cycling infrastructure. I first moved to Halifax in 2017 when the bikeway network was originally agreed upon. Now in 2025, we are 3 years past the proposed completion date of 2022. At roughly 60% complete, this report suggests the program delivery schedule will further delay completion from 2022 by 6+ years into 2028. Meanwhile, I and others are actively cycling in the city and are endangered by the delay of this network. Having failed to deliver on the original deadline, there needs to be improved mechanism for ensuring completion. How are residents supposed to have confidence that this will be completed as now presented if there has already been such a delay regarding infrastructure implementation? Rather than stating the risks of developing bikeway infrastructure, which remain consistent since 2017, efforts need to be directed to determining how the implementation of the network can be accelerated and enforced. As I previously mentioned, people are actively cycling in the city. According to data from Statistics Canada collected between May 2023 and May 2024, Nova Scotia reported the fastest growth in the share of active transport commuters, with 8.6% of commuters relying on active transportation. In a previously conducted survey mentioned with the IMP, it was revealed that 48% of Halifax residents state safer infrastructure as the #1 thing that would encourage them to cycle more. If Halifax has any hopes of caring for this increasing population of commuters relying on active transportation and developing alternatives to cars, they must escalate the delivery of the bikeway network. As HCC's response concludes, cities across Canada and the world are recognizing the need for a rapid transformation to non-car-centric design and infrastructure. Halifax needs to share this vision and be a part of this transformation. I invite the councillors to change the tone of the conversation from superfluous risks to the real risks we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. No one on the board, so I will call again for if there's anyone else who would like to present today. Is there anyone else who would like to present today? Third and final call. Anyone else like to present to committee today? Okay, thank you. That concludes public participation. So our next item, there are no information items brought forward, so we'll go to staff reports. 13.1.1 Rural Transit Grant Program Review. So who would like to put, I don't think there's a presentation with this one. So who would like to put the motion on the floor? Councillor Cuddle.
Sorry, I've got the report in front of me. Recommendation. There we go. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council direct the CAO to 1. Establish a rural transit advisory group to lead and foster strategic partnerships with key stakeholders to implement the initiatives recommended in this report. 2. Prepare a staff report to amend Administrative Order 2014-012 ADM respecting grants for rural transit to establish a capital grants funding subcategory with defined funding criteria, priority outcomes, and evaluation measures for consideration and approval by the Grants Committee and Regional Council. 3. Establish a professional development and training support program for rural transit funding program partners that leverages existing municipal training programs. 4. Develop a fair integration strategy for Regional Council's consideration to facilitate transfers from rural transit services to the Halifax Transit Network. 5. Support brand awareness for rural transit services through Halifax Transit's existing marketing and communication channels. And 6. Develop a micro-transit service plan for Regional Council's consideration that prioritizes addressing gaps in rural service.
Second by Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. And yeah, okay, well, first of all, I think staff know how thrilled I am to finally see this report come before us here at TSC. It's been a long time in the making, and it's an excellent report. I have to really commend the effort that was put into writing the report and organizing the report and conveying the information and the presentation of the data collected and what we heard. And I do feel that the issues have been understood and that the communities have been listened to. So that's very encouraging. I do know that, you know, for my community of Sambro and the Prospect Road, I do want to note that it was my understanding that we were going to have a pop-up engagement along the Prospect Road, because I think when you look at the map of where the engagements happened, the Prospect Road is kind of a big hole, and when you look at the results, all of the communities that were surveyed have some form of existing rural service, have a rural service transit provider of some kind, except for Sambro. And the other exception there that I wanted noted was the Prospect Road. But that pop-up, I guess, never happened for some reason. I'm not sure why. I thought it was supposed to be, I actually have dates here for August 15th from 3 to 5 p.m. at Holtz. So if someone has an explanation for that, because I think that piece in there by not, and it was a struggle because I asked for that extra pop-up and was told, no, you were focusing on grocery stores. But the grocery stores you're targeting completely missed that entire population of over 8,000 people. And it would have provided some more context, in particular for areas like Sambro Loop that don't have any, that used to have a service, do not have an existing service, and where there's a lot of questions from the community to get a transit service back. So it all looks good to me, and my questions, the report all looks good to me. The thing I'm really interested in, given what I've just stated, that a lot of the actions here are really focused on kind of not-for-profit service providers like Musco Riders and that in supporting them. But the piece that I was really interested in was the gaps and how we're going to address the gaps, and that would be the last item in the recommendation around the micro transit service plan. And I'm hoping somebody from staff could come and talk a little bit more about what the next steps are with that and what a potential timeline might be, or how that in particular is going to work. Because for me, for areas that don't have anything right now, that's the most important piece.
Thank you. Patricia Hughes, Director of Planning and Customer Engagement at Halifax Transit. So the microtransit service plan, I think, is potentially one of the biggest deliverables coming out of this, and can be a bit of a game changer in the areas that are really, the attachment C, the map shows areas that really there are not really any options. And so the intent with that, so microtransit is it's been rolling out in big ways across the entire country, largely as an on-demand, flexible system. It's still shared ride, quite often based on technology, using an app. So our intent would be, if this was approved by council, we would go away and start an implementation plan right away. We think that microtransit is a potentially really good solution in some of our communities, but we need to look closer at the model. How does it work? What is the communities in which there are gaps are quite diverse and unique, and we'd want to look at the variety of communities, where it might make sense to start, and what that model might look like in those. So our intent would be to come back with an implementation plan in time that we could do implementation in the 26-27 budget year if it was approved by council. So to kind of quickly go away and come back within 6 months-ish with this is our proposed rollout, this is the the one community to start, or the 3 communities, or 10, or whatever that might be, that council would have a robust plan that time that looks at jurisdictional scans and looks at the costing of it, because it would have a cost, obviously. But if we get direction, we'll go away and do that work in this current year, so that implementation could be next year, is our intent.
Okay, that is very encouraging news, and thank you very much, and I'll come back. I see my time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also on microtransit, just looking for some context and just sort of a high-level interpretation of what the highest potential areas for microtransit might be in HRM. What would you be looking for to identify where the most viable microtransit could be in our municipality?
I think it's too early to answer that with any certainty. I would say that microtransit has a lot of potential uses, both for any kind of service gap, which could also be in urban areas. We hear a lot about industrial parks on weekends, and so we've talked about and thought about microtransit a bit for a few years, but the shift at this point is about preparing that implementation plan, but with a focus on the rural areas as a result of this report. So I think it depends on the approach. Once we meet with other stakeholders, other business units, the jurisdictional scan, what is the implementation plan look like, and what's the approach? And there may be value in launching early in a community where we think there'll be a higher number of rides per hour, as well as maybe one further from the center as well for data collection purposes. So really couldn't speak to where now, but I think it will be something we'll come back with multiple options for council on how ambitious and the intent versus data versus permanent rollout.
Okay. And this is, we're in sort of a budget efficiency exercise right now at HRM. So is this considered a core service?
I don't believe that I can answer that question.
Okay.
I would say it would certainly, if we go down this path, it would have 26, 27 budget impacts that would be new.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the service, the core service, I mean, that is a good question. I think we are doing a service study. I'm waiting for it to come back on urban, suburban, rural kind of services, and on what services exist in these areas, and kind of what taxes people are paying. And, so I think that will help inform this. I mean, when you look at a community like Sambro, they really don't have any municipal services at all. I did put in a play box at the playground with some used toys in it, but we don't have a library, we don't have a bus, we don't have even snow clearing. I guess we do have policing out there, but that is an important piece. I did have some questions about the marketing, branding, and training for existing ride providers. I don't have any in my district specifically, but I was another councillor I was speaking to who had these questions, and I thought I'd put them on the table now, maybe in preparation for when this comes to regional. But in the marketing, branding, and governance, like, how is that going to be funded and supported? Like, knowing a lot of these organizations rely on volunteers, using volunteer time to do training is taking, asking more of people. And then how do you have, kind of compliance on that to ensure there's a level of consistency in expectations across the municipality if we continue to rely on volunteer-driven service providers? And the other one is, and the marketing is a really interesting piece, because I think there's a lot of opportunity in that, again, on how to make it a success. I made a comment about bike lanes, right, in your studies, when you're looking at, there's no children on the bike lanes, therefore they don't use them, rather than saying, well, why aren't there children on the bike lanes, and how do we get them there if it's a desire line, something desirable that we want to have happen. The marketing on this is going to be really, really key, I think, to future success. And so how do you identify potential users? What are your thoughts about that, and about doing that marketing, whether it's to seniors groups or whether it's to schools, like, junior high students, or, other things?
Some great questions there for sure. I think I'll start by first highlighting that the intent with all of this is to first develop the Rural Transit Advisory Group working with the partners and the nonprofits. So it would be our intent to not, determine those answers ourselves, but to really work hand in hand and collaborate with them. And specifically on the training, I think, we wouldn't be looking for compliance. It would be more about supporting and helping to build out a list and develop resources collaboratively, rather than saying, this is any kind of requirement. So really just having a more formal arrangement with them and some dedicated areas to focus on where we can provide more support. Marketing specifically too, I think we have done a few ad hoc things over the years. We had a brochure for the Porter's Lake Park and Ride that had a Musco Rider logo on it at one time years ago. So I think that a lot of that is if we're in constant communication and looking for those opportunities and talking about it, finding the kind of easy paths that aren't necessarily costly for the municipality. But I think there's examples in the report, like having their logos in our rider's guide or on the back of the route map, kind of giving them a little bit of elevated presence with some of our riders that maybe can connect. But then in the proactive marketing, some of the things that were mentioned, I think it's more about working with them and having those ongoing conversations and discussions to see what the needs are, which might be different with different rural transit providers.
Okay, great. Well, counselors are a great resource for connecting with community groups, and I look forward to continuing to work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Patricia. So mine's more of the collaboration with the province. So in collaboration with the province, will the areas that are potential for priority for microtransit be based on most of the plans or some of the plans that the province has going forward?
I think in terms of the microtransit implementation, that's definitely a factor we can consider, and maybe some of the interesting things about microtransit and the different ways it can work is it does it operate in a community that brings people to those community resources, or does it operate where it can tie into the broader transit network? So I think understanding the province's plans as well and where the different tie-ins will be important to make sure we're making the most of what we're doing with microtransit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If no one objects, I have two questions to ask from here. Okay, so I was just, thank you, Patricia. So this, of course, proposes us being much more involved in this space than we currently are. Just when I'm looking at it, I'm just wondering at what point does the line just become so blurred between us and community service providers that it really is just us? And what does that mean in terms of our service offering? And then two, I'm curious, as you know, this might be something that comes as part of the work that you're going to do. We have metrics that we look at for regular transit service. Would we have metrics that we would be looking at for community-based services in terms of financial sustainability, usership, that kind of thing?
Great. Yeah, there certainly would be metrics, and I think that across the country where people are doing microtransit, they're looking at cost per ride, for example, and comparing it in different densities and different types of communities. So I think it would be a whole new set of metrics, and may vary greatly across the region because we have a lot of different types of neighborhoods and communities. So we would definitely be looking at metrics in the report that comes back. And in terms of the blurred line, I would say that the nonprofits are they are their own entity, and the support we provide right now is through a grant. So we really are not very involved in their operating. We like to stay informed, and if they're changing fares and those kind of things, we want them to advise us. But it really is more of a grant program and not getting very much into the details of what they're doing. So I think some of the strategies here with support do change that dynamic a bit, but I think there still is a divide, but I guess that would be for council to tell us if it's getting too gray.
Thank you for that. So I don't see anyone else on the board. If someone would like to call the question. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Thank you, staff. So next up, we have 13.1.2, which is the taxi and limousine rate review. So there is a staff presentation from Peter Nightingale.
So good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of Transportation Standing Committee. My name is Peter Nightingale. I'm the manager of License Standards with HRM Community Safety, and here today regarding taxi and limousine rate review as with amendments to Administrative Order 39. So for just a little bit of background on how we regulate taxi and limousine rates. So there is a schedule in Administrative Order 39 adopted by Council, which sets out the metered rates that taxis can charge and the hourly rates charged by limousines. The last rate adjustment was done in 2022. And to be clear, this rate schedule applies only to taxis and limousines. It does not apply to transportation network companies. We call them TNCs, more commonly known as rideshare companies. Example of that would be companies like Uber. They are free to set their own rates under our bylaw and admin order. So just to break down the components of a taxi fare a little bit, there are three components of a taxi fare. The first component is the initial charge, which is often referred to as a drop rate. That covers the first 142.8 meters of your journey. And that's the dollar amount that comes up on the meter as soon as you sit down in the car. Once you get beyond that, you're charged an increment charge for each additional 142.8 meters that you travel. And the third component of the taxi fare is wait time. So if you're in a taxi that's stopped in traffic or the driver is otherwise stopped and waiting, you're charged this wait time charge for every 30-second increment. Limousines are a little more straightforward. That's a straight hourly rate that limousines charge their passengers regardless of distance traveled or speed or wait time, anything like that. Cruise ship passengers picked up at the Halifax Port Authority also have an hourly rate that taxis can charge in lieu of the metered rate. And this rate review does not impact rates charged for vehicles operating under the licenses issued by the Halifax International Airport Authority. So they determine who can operate on their property and set rates for trips from the airport. Administrative Order 39 has a mechanism built into it for how rates should be adjusted. And there are some factors that must be considered when we're bringing forward a rate review. Those are the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index, all items. This is a Statistics Canada measure that basically looks at the cost of all things that consumers buy in Nova Scotia and how much those prices increase from year to year. We do a survey of other Canadian municipalities to see where we stand against other jurisdictions. We collect input from industry stakeholders, that would be drivers, owners, and brokers. We request an independent review from the Halifax Partnership, and we can look at any other information that we think may assist Council in its consideration of a rate review. There were a few other factors that we brought into the equation this year, the first being the change in HST from 15% to 14% on April 1st. The second was the elimination of tolls on Halifax Harbour bridges. And finally, we looked broadly at technology changes in the vehicle for hire industry over the past 5 to 10 years. That's both looking at new technology that we have mandated taxis must have, as well as new services that industry has offered over the years. So as I mentioned, that baseline for the rate review set out in the admin order is CPI. So the percentage change in CPI since the last rate adjustment was done is an increase of 12.5%. So the math gets a little complex on this, so I've tried to simplify as much as possible. HST is built into the taxi fare. It's not added on to the metered rate, which means that when the HST dropped by 1%, the drivers essentially got a 1% raise. So to kind of make this a fair and true adjustment, we essentially took the existing rates, lowered them by 1%, and then increased that by 12.5%. So hopefully that's clear. It comes out to around 11.5% would be the target over what a customer pays today versus what they would pay if the rate is increased in line with this recommendation. There's a few other fare components that we looked at as part of this rate review. And the first is above and beyond that 12.5% target is an increase of an extra 50 cents on the initial charge or the drop rate. And that's specifically to cover the cost of technology like the GPS that we require to have in vehicles. They have to have technology to track and make logs of trips that are taken, vehicle location, and they're required to have payment processing terminals as well to accept electronic payments. which all incur extra fees for either drivers or brokers, depending on who's covering the cost of that. The flip side of that additional increase to the drop rate is that we are explicitly prohibiting any additional charges for payment processing. So in other words, when you get to the end of your taxi ride, if you choose to pay by credit card or debit, you will pay the metered rate. You will not pay an add-on fee of 25 cents or $1 or whatever it may be. The other tweak we're making is removing the surcharge for the driver loading parcels or articles in the trunk. So currently, if you get picked up at the grocery store and the taxi driver puts your bags of groceries in the trunk for you, they can charge you 10 cents per bag, which is being eliminated just to bring us more in line with other jurisdictions. And it's also kind of, I would say, a bit of a hidden fee that passengers maybe don't expect to pay. So that would be removed from the fare schedule. The other significant change we're making is that should there be any further changes in HST, the licensing authority could automatically adjust the fare schedule to accommodate that. So rather than us having to come back to TSC or back to council to implement those changes, it would just be automatic. So the last time we saw an HST change, I think, was in the early 2000s, where the federal government dropped the HST by 2%, and then the province came a few years later and raised it by 2%. So to really stop the drivers from feeling the impact either by tax rates going up or down, it just kind of keeps the status quo without having to go through a lengthy process to accommodate that. So that's how we kind of come up with a target rate for how much we are looking to adjust taxi and limousine rates. And there's two main ways that we can adjust taxi rates. The first we call a blended rate increase, where each of those three components of the taxi fare all increase by approximately the target percentage. So it's a little, I say approximately because you're dealing with small numbers and with rounding, you're not going to hit that exact percentage point, but that's the target. And the outcome of that would be that all trips taken increase by approximately the same cost percentage. The other mechanism that we've done in the past is an unblended rate increase, where you apply different percentage changes to the different components of the fare. So when the rate adjustments were done in 2022, we increased the drop rate by more than the target percentage and increased the increment charges less. So this, is about trying to keep those higher value or longer taxi trips a bit more cost competitive, and still trying to compensate drivers for sort of the unpaid portion of their jobs. So there is dwell time, there is deadheading, there is things like that that drivers aren't charging a fare for, and by increasing a little bit the cost of every taxi ride, it helps accommodate that. I won't go into this too much, but I did just want to show a few example trips and what the rate increases would look like depending on what rate mechanism we go with. So the blended rate increase is staff's recommendation. And just to pick some common points, so to go from City Hall to Alderney Landing today would cost you approximately $13.20, and that's assuming no wait time. So there's no traffic, you're not stopped at a red light. That's simply your drop rate plus your increment charges. Under the blended rate increase, that would increase to $14.72, so about an extra $1.50. A longer trip, like going from City Hall to Middle Sackville, today you'd be paying approximately $48.20, again with no wait time. And if the blended rate increase was selected, that would increase approximately $5.70. So you can see we're not hitting an exact 11.5% increase across those categories just due to rounding, but it's in that vicinity. With an unblended rate increase, you would see those shorter trips increase more and the longer trips increase less. So the same trip from City Hall to Alderney Landing would go up slightly more, but still only a $1.54 increase, so still fairly close. Whereas the longer trips from City Hall to Middle Sackville, you're seeing a substantially smaller increase of $2.94 versus $5.70. And you can see the percentage increase quite a bit lower. So the full report of the industry feedback in the survey that we did is in the staff report, but there were a couple of questions that I wanted to focus on that kind of speak to the recommendation that's before the committee today. So we did have a total of 171 responses to the survey that we conducted. 130 of those respondents identified as a taxi or limousine driver, 102 identified as an owner, and 11 identified as being associated with a broker. So important to note that someone can be a driver and an owner, or they could be just a driver, so they may have selected multiple options, which is why it doesn't add up to 170. So the main question for those who supported a rate increase, we asked if they wanted to see a rate increase that was in line with the CPI of 12.5%. 53.9% of survey respondents selected that option. 13.9% wanted to see an increase actually higher than the CPI. So those two sort of categories combined, we had about 68% in favor of a rate increase of CPI or more. Smaller percentages of respondents either wanted to see a rate increase but not quite that drastic, or wanted to see rates decrease or stay the same. When asked about how we should adjust taxi and specifically taxi rates, the response was overwhelmingly in support of a blended rate increase, with 58% selecting that option, and then 27% selecting the unblended, and about 14% of people saying they did not support a taxi increase at all. On the question of, essentially this is adding that extra 50 cents to the drop rate to cover all the costs associated with technology and prohibiting the add-on payment fees that you sometimes get when you take a taxi ride. There was very large support from this from taxi industry. 82% favored increasing the drop rate and then prohibiting those payment fees that we see today, with only about 18% saying that the drop rate should stay lower and passengers should have to pay extra if they're paying by card. I just quickly wanted to touch on cleaning fees, which is not part of our recommendation, but it was part of our survey. And so I just wanted to speak to it a little bit. There was, again, very large support from industry about incorporating a cleaning fee directly into our fare schedule. 85% of respondents were in favor of seeing this built into the fare schedule. And literally they were split right down the middle on the amount that cleaning fee should be. Half of them wanted to see between 50 and 100. The other half thought it should be more than 100. And the reason that this isn't included in our recommendation today is that this actually requires a change to bylaw T1000. So that's a different process than the admin order change for rates. So we would propose sort of dealing with this as a separate matter. So with all that in mind, staff's recommendation today is to proceed with the blended fare increase in line with CPI changes. And happy to take any questions committee may have about that.
Thank you for the presentation. Colleagues, we are at about 7 to 3. Could we have a motion to extend past 3 o'clock till 4 maybe? Seeing head nods. Moved by Councillor Clary to extend past 4. Second, Councillor Purdy. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, we'll see where we get to for 3:30. Okay. Thank you, colleagues. So now we'll go to, first on the board is Councillor Clary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll put the motion on the floor. That the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council adopt the amendments to Administrative Order 39, the Taxi and Limousine Regulation Administrative Order, as set out in Attachment 2 of the staff report dated February 20, 2025. Thank you, Councillor Purdy.
Second.
I have a ton of questions, and we don't have a whole lot of time. So just rapid fire, a couple quick ones here. Do we have data on, do we know the number or percent of rides that are taken in Halifax by TNC versus taxi and or limo?
We have rates on rides taken by licensed brokers versus TNCs, but we don't have the data for independent taxis, which would make up a minority of those. If you just bear with me for one moment. So in 2024, we saw about 59.9% of passenger rides taken by TNCs, with 40% taken by taxis who are associated with a broker. In the first quarter of 2025, we are at about 68.8% of rides with TNCs and 31.2% with taxis associated with brokers.
And that doesn't include the independents.
Correct.
Okay. So, here's a philosophical one that I'm hoping you can answer quickly. And if you can't, that's okay. What is the public benefit of regulating taxi fares and not regulating TNC prices?
Answer quickly. Not sure, but
okay. And that's all I really wanted to get.
I can come. I certainly I
Yeah.
can speak to that, but
Yeah.
if you don't want to use your time on that, I'll.
No, it's just that I'm like, do you have an elevator pitch?
Sorry, I would say historically prices were regulated, I believe, to protect the taxi industry, and that is. I'm not a fan of this answer, but that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
We started regulating taxi rates long before there was such a thing as a transportation network company.
Right. No, but my question was around the public benefit of regulating taxi fares and not, so it's a combined, think of it as a Boolean sort of question. I understand the history of regulating taxis for public safety, for tourism, for all those other things. But we diverged from that when we said, okay, we're going to allow TNCs in Halifax, but we're not going to regulate their prices. And there's never been an articulation of the public benefit of regulating one side of the industry, which is now 68% unregulated and only 31% regulated. So in fact, we're not regulating the price of the vast majority of rides that are now taken in Halifax. In the jurisdictional scan, the average costs, it looks like, and I calculated several of them, we took a 5-kilometer ride, a 10-kilometer ride, and a 35-kilometer ride, and then we divided those rides by 3 to get an average. Am I correct in that arithmetic?
That's correct.
Okay. But that's not an actual average in the sense that, maybe 157 rides were 5 kilometers and 300 rides were 10 kilometers and only 2 rides were 35. You would get a very different average if the proportion broke down that way. So we don't actually know the average price of a taxi ride in any of those jurisdictions or our own jurisdiction.
Yes, no, that's a fair point. We have some data on taxi rides in our jurisdiction. We have no data on taxi rides in other jurisdictions, so certainly see the flaw in that methodology.
And the survey that was done with drivers or owners or possibly both, I understand kind of coming at it from a driver's perspective, and it makes sense that they would answer in the proportions they did. What was the consultation like with brokers, like Casino Yellow Bobs?
We did. The survey was open to all members of the taxi industry, whether they were brokers or drivers or owners. So they all completed the same survey. We did have some feedback from some brokers, but the only formal consultation was a survey.
Okay. Because they would have a very different perspective on the viability of the business in general versus, that would be like going to a pulp and paper mill and asking the employees, do you think prices of your paper should go up? And then asking the owner of the mill, do you think prices of paper should go up when they're in a world market and those prices are determined globally? The requirement for going over 2% or 2.5% increase, it says it must include consideration of a number of things. One of them was Halifax Partnership Review. The way I read that paragraph at the bottom of page 6 and beginning of page 5, they didn't provide an actual review. They said, we haven't looked into this. You should probably do it every year instead of once in a while. And
Councillor Clary,
yeah, I see him all the time.
If you can.
So the partnership, is that a real review in your estimation?
So yes, we do reach out to Halifax Partnership. We cannot compel them to perform an independent review, so we certainly ask, and they provide the feedback that they can provide in the limited manner that they can without, again, I guess we can't compel them to undertake that work.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I think through the discussion that we're having here at Council and the presentation we had earlier and that discussion, we've certainly created a bit of a flawed process that benefits one model over another, and I think that's concerning, and it's actually being reflected in the percentage of rides. Seeing that shift. We have the information that it's possibly having a real impact. What I feel we've done is that by approving TNCs to operate in the city is we've introduced a new species to the pond without giving the existing fish the tools or ability to compete. If anything, it's not even giving them the tools, it's hobbling them. We kind of tied their hands in being able to be competitive. So, for me, this is something that needs to change, and it's complicated because we do recognize the need to increase wages for taxi cab drivers. I mean, doing it twice in, 13 years? I mean, we demonstrates we are not agile in doing this, and we're not invested in the success of the company. This isn't our company, and I don't think that we should be. It's not our business, and I don't see what our role is in regulating it. So with that, I mean, I want to propose two things. One, I want to move, defeat the recommendation from staff for the blended rate and move to an unblended rate, which I think addresses some of the concerns that were given to us about being competitive on longer rides by having less of an increase. At the same time, giving cab drivers an increase in wages immediately. And then I would also like to move an amendment, or maybe it's a supplemental report, I'll look to legal for your advice on this, to make a motion for a staff report on modernizing Administrative Order number 39, the Taxi and Limousine Regulation Administrative Order, to reflect changes in industry practices and models to ensure broker-based companies have the same competitive advantages as TNCs. I don't know if that's in order or not, but maybe you could just advise on how to proceed.
Sure, I think on that one, because it's going to be somewhat different from what we have in front, that it would be a separate motion, that it should be considered as something separate, and then we can vote on that separately and go that way.
So a supplemental report on this?
I
perhaps?
think probably something along those lines would be best, yeah.
Okay, so packaging this all together then, I guess I would like to...
If I may suggest, Councillor Cuddle, would it be amendable to, you're asking us to defeat the main motion, so why don't we debate the main motion, and then you could move that as a supplemental report request when we're done, as legal as suggested, so that we don't kind of have to amend a motion that might get defeated.
So alternative one and the supplemental report is what I'm proposing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. And I think I'm in support of that. I'm wondering if what you're asking with the supplemental is too broad, if we should be more specific. But wondering, on the survey, was there an option to deregulate the rates? Like, was that one of the options provided to the service providers and owners and brokers? And also, just from staff's perspective, from your perspective, just wondering why deregulating the rates wouldn't be one of the recommendations by staff, considering the restrictiveness of this and the, decreasing the competitiveness of the businesses. Why hasn't that come as a recommendation? Just wondering.
Thank you. So through the chair, so to answer your first question, no, deregulating was not one of the options available to respondents in the survey. And I guess the second part of that is why. I mean, the short answer is the administrative order tells us how we should adjust rates. And so staff are carrying out essentially council's direction through the admin order in bringing forward the recommendation that we have. Certainly acknowledging that there have been many changes in the vehicle for hire industry, and that the mechanism that's in the AO may not be reflective of where we are today with the industry. Right. But essentially that's why we have come forward with the recommendation we have, is essentially council told us to when they adopted that admin order.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you then is that it is outdated and it should have a little revamp. So, okay, thank you.
There's a bit of a huddle back here as to the art of the possible. I'll go ahead and take a moment while these two chat since there's no one else on the board. I did have one question. Could we, if we wanted to, deregulate like do we actually have to set a price? Like, is this required in legislation that we have to regulate this, or could council choose to say, we're just not?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So the way that we regulate vehicle for hire industry is set out in the Motor Vehicle Act, and I think there's things in the charter there as well about that. So it basically sets a list of things that we may do through a bylaw. We are not necessarily compelled to do them. So certainly there are jurisdictions in Nova Scotia which do not set taxi rates. Condition what I'm saying on any change that's substantial. We do legal review and whatnot to make sure that's a possibility. But from my understanding of the legislation, it's an option certainly that can be explored.
Councillor Clary, Councillor Purdy's kind of feeler questions. We could actually look at this in a supplemental report if we wanted to. Okay, thank you. We'll go back to Councillor Cuddle. And I think, are you your motion?
Yeah.
Just before you do that, because that's what these two were talking about, was there a conclusion as to what we can do here?
We've got a motion on the floor already, so we'll have to address that one first, and then we can move forward if there's with a different motion, and then we can go from that one. I know that there's alternatives in the report if council or if committee wishes to look at those as a potential one.
There we go. Just a question about the motion I proposed about modernizing administrative order, the administrative order. Would that get to what we've all been discussing about, do we have to set the rates? Is that will come forward in the supplemental report where we have to do the legal review? Because I think that's where I'm trying to get to, and I'm just trying to figure out, is this the right step to getting to that point?
I believe so, but it is part of the motion. I think you would want to make sure that some of those things are included in your motion to make sure that you're getting to what you want to see in that supplemental report then.
Okay, so I might leave it broad, but perhaps for the discussion on the motion, we can make note of those things, or people can make a friendly amendment if they feel there's something specific.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So I see Councillor Cleary's on the board.
Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Clary, then we'll have a vote on the motion that's on the floor unless someone else buzzes in. And if that is defeated, then we'll go to Councillor Cuddle for an alternative. If it passes, we'll still go to Councillor Cuddle for her supplemental motion. So Councillor Clary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think based on the discussion we have, I mean, we're at a place where in early 2025, 68% of the rides that are happening in Halifax are not taxi rides. So they're not regulated fares. You said 2024 is 59.9%, so we've increased almost 9% just in the first few months of this year from last year. I suspect this is going to continue to increase and the number of taxi rides will decrease to a point where it is unsustainable. I've talked to many taxi drivers who call me regularly who also drive for Uber as well as being a taxi driver. And they complain about how much they make in both. And so I think I want to defeat the motion that's on the floor. I do like Councillor Cuddle's discussion around looking at something broader. I would like to look at the staff report alternative talks about we could consider an alternative rate adjustment. And I think that's an appropriate way to look at it. But I also like the suggestion from one of the owners of Casino that maybe we look at a pilot and allow brokers to adjust their prices as they see fit for a short period of time, or go nuclear and just deregulate fares for taxis and limos. Again, I say this, we don't regulate the price of pizza. We don't regulate the price of soda pop. We don't regulate the price of tour companies that pick up people from the cruise ships. But here we are regulating taxis and limos, and we're doing it in a way that is now only 31% of the market. So anyway, I will vote down what's on the floor and look forward to a broad look at going forward. And I don't think there's any urgency. I don't think we have to say there has to be a price increase or no price increase in the immediate term, because I think without a real review, knowing what the market consequences are going to be, if we were to say keep it the same or increase it, we're flying blind. We have zero idea what the actual impact is going to be for taxis and limos. And so I think more information and a broader look at this point in time, given where we are, cards on the table, I voted against TNCs coming into Halifax for environmental reasons. And here we are, we don't even get the fee that some other jurisdictions get from those TNCs. Anyway, so I can't support what's there, and I look forward to what Councillor Cuddle is going to bring forward. Question.
Question has been called on the motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, we'll roll that back. All those opposed? Okay, so that was unanimous. Back to Councillor Cuddle for something else.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So that I think this has been a good discussion, and just to add to some of Councillor Cleary's final comments there, it's also about supporting local, right? And when we talk about supporting local, and we know that 30% of TNCs, it's not staying in Canada, it's certainly not staying local. We talk about living wages. Cab drivers used to make a living wage. People used to be able to afford to live of being a cab driver. It was a viable occupation, and we don't see that anymore. It's a gig economy. So I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why we need to kind of rethink this entire thing. So I'm going to put a motion on the floor that, one, we accept alternative 2 in the staff report to adjust taxi rates in accordance with option 2, an unblended rate as set option 2 for an unblended rate as set out in the staff report. This would require a supplementary staff report, so an amendment package could be prepared by staff. And 2, I got so many windows open here. 2, make a motion for a supplemental report on modernizing Administrative Order number 39, the Taxi and Limousine Regulation Administrative Order, to reflect changes in industry practices and models to ensure broker-based companies have the same competitive advantages as TNCs.
Second by Councillor Purdy. Go
Okay.
ahead, Councillor.
With that, I think we've had a good discussion on this. I'm wondering if it's a benefit to give direction on exploring the possibility of a pilot. Would you like something specific, and perhaps somebody would like to make a friendly amendment to my motion to include that if necessary?
I can speak a little bit to that if it's helpful for the committee. Sorry, my first comment would actually be that in your motion, I think it would be helpful to include bylaw T1000 in that. I think this is likely beyond what we could do just through Administrative Order 39. The comments on a pilot project. So a pilot project would likely require an amendment to bylaw T1000 to allow us to do a pilot project. So certainly staff are supportive of exploring options for modernizing how we regulate taxis and how we set rates. I can't say specifically how that should be done at this time because we haven't done that research. So just ask to kind of keep your motion open so that we can provide you with the best options that we can.
Okay, so I would then I would add to my motion as a friendly, depending on the seconder over here, add to modernize Administrative Order number 39, Taxi Limousine Regulation Administrative Order, and bylaw T1000. Is that right? T1000, I think. Yeah. Yeah, T1000. So, oh, yeah, okay.
That's friendly? Yes, okay. And I don't see any objections, so that's fine. So we'll declare that friendly. We're out of time. You can come back, Councillor. We'll go to Councillor Cleary, first time on the amendment. Or sorry, the new motion, I think.
New motion, yes. But very quickly. So I can't support it just because it's increasing the fares. while we're doing this, and I think I don't think it's advisable to change the fares and then look at options for other kinds of fares or deregulation or pilots, because then you're locking something in for a period of time where people are going to have to follow the new fares. And if we're seeing this massive increase in TNC share of the marketplace, this will just exacerbate that. And my fear would be that the number of taxi and limo rides will go down to a point where there's not much of an industry to try to salvage at some later point when staff come back with some creative ideas. So anyway, I can't support it because it has that fare increase in it. I do like the second part where we look at all those alternatives. And if it was just the alternatives, I could support it, but not with the fare increase. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purdy, I believe you're first time on the amendment. Yeah, they're all coming up wrong here. So.
This is a new motion, though.
Go ahead, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can see where my colleague's coming from there with not wanting a increase in the fares, but I mean, they've had one increase in 13 years. That is unconscionable. I don't think I can vote that down. I don't like the broadness of this. I want to go for deregulation. Like what are we doing? Just deregulate this. So modernizing and coming up with new complicated ways to regulate the rates from now on, no, deregulate. So I don't know if that can somehow be included in a modernization. Like I would like to look at specifically deregulating the rates of the taxi and limousine service. The market can dictate what the rates are. This is, I think this is a antiquated thing that we're doing, and it's, as the owner said, desecrating their industry, and we can see through the numbers that Councillor Cleary brought, it is desecrating the industry. So we don't want that to continue if we can. We don't want to be the cause of an industry going under. So can we incorporate as a friendly amendment specifically deregulation of the rates in the modernization of the bylaw?
So you're looking to maybe add like including deregulation?
Right, if that's...
I'll just look over to Councillor Cuddle to see.
I would assume that the modernization would probably be a number of options. That would deregulation be included in one of the options you're looking at there, or do we need to specify?
I think based on the wording of your motion, I would understand modernize to mean modernize the way that we regulate the vehicle for hire industry. Deregulating certainly would be a way of doing that. Yeah, whether it's ends up being the recommended approach or not, it's certainly something that we could explore through that motion as it's worded, I believe. Okay. Does that answer?
You believe, but what if you're not the one that does the report? What if somebody else does the report and they have a different interpretation? If it's not in the motion, it's not necessarily going to be. Do they watch the videos though? Okay. Okay, but just in case. And what would be the timeline on this report? We've heard that there's kind of a impetus to get this done very fast because the industry is suffering.
Mm-hmm. I'd be hesitant to commit to a specific timeline because it's not just us doing the work. We do have to go through legal reviews. There have to be approved by, executive directors and CAO's office and whatnot. There's also, likely a tremendous amount of research involved in this request. So I wouldn't be comfortable committing to a specific timeline right now. I would say we would commit to doing it as quickly as possible. It would be a priority for us. But we do not have dedicated staff doing this type of work. So I just would want to caution a little bit that there is likely, it's not going to be the next TSC meeting. Let me put it that way.
okay. And what was the final conclusion on the adding the words
Well,
deregulation?
you could propose an amendment if you want, but staff had indicated that if I can interpret there, Peter, that it would be something you would consider as part of that motion.
All right, Peter.
That's what I heard anyway.
Okay.
Okay, if no one objects, I just want to speak briefly from here. So there's not many votes that I regret after 8 years, but the TNC one is one of them. You know, I don't think we got that quite right, and there was at the council at the time was under tremendous pressure. The public was completely dissatisfied with the taxi industry. There was so much call to allow, you know, to allow rideshare because you could get it anywhere else, and you know, that's one that I do kind of regret. I almost voted against it at the time, but I didn't, and it's one of the few. So when I look at this, I actually tend to agree with, this is a weird meeting because Councillor Clary, Councillor Purdy, and myself all seem to be on the same page of wanting to look at just deregulating, that this whole thing is just doesn't make any sense anymore with rideshare being what it is now grown to. So I'm happy to support Councillor Cuddle's motion on modernization, but for me, the option I really want to look at is just scrapping setting fares altogether. So that's where I'm at on this. So we'll go back to Councillor Cuddle to close.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I think it is important to get the staff report back with the whole lay of the land. Otherwise, we're sitting up here making decisions, kind of flying blind once again. And that doesn't always lead to the best outcomes. So I do hope that the staff report can come back in a timely manner, because there is some urgency around this. There is an industry at stake. As for the, you know, Councillor Cleary was speaking about not improving increase to the fares. The majority of people who responded to the survey recognize that there is a need for a fare increase to, you know, match wages. We did hear from Casino that the owner of Casino that one of the models that would be preferred is where there's the majority of trips are short trips, and that a small increase in that would help, and keeping the longer trips at a lower rate, like the bulk toilet paper analogy, would still make them competitive with the TNCs to some degree, at least more competitive. There hasn't been a raise in a long time. I see this as an interim measure until we get the supplemental report back, where we can look at other options around, including deregulation, to be included in that. But that there probably is a bit of an immediate need to address some of the current shortcomings in terms of fares and wages. So that's why I moved option number 2. Option number 2. Alternative number 1, but which is option number 2. Okay. All right.
Okay, so no one else is on the board. Ms. Clerk, do you have something on your, I know there were some challenges there. Do you have something ready just to put on the screen so everyone is clear what we're voting on? I think we've more or less got it, but. Okay, so we're going to vote on 1 and 2 separately. So everyone understands? Okay, so let's vote on number, oh. I think it would come back here first. Or does this whole thing have to go to regional? I don't think it really matters because we're not going to get the supplemental report in number 2 back before number 1 is what I'm hearing. Let's see. number one has to go to regional. Number two, what happens long term would come back here first, or we could send it straight to regional. I think it makes sense, I'm open to whatever the committee wants to do, to have it come back to us, because it will not hold up number one or affect number one. Everything takes longer if it has to come back to us. We could. Maybe we'd have to look at a vote on that to see what the mood here is. I think the clerk's looking for our direction as to whether we want to send it to regional.
So the question that we have is, right now, the full recommendation would go to council, regional council, and regional council would be the one to pass the request for supplementary. Unless I understand correctly that you want the supplementary report, and this is where the debate is happening, to stay at where it's only recommendation one that's going to go to regional council, while number two stays at TSC to come back to TSC.
Okay, so if I may, Ms. Clerk, just as a question that maybe will clarify things, because I think we're talking about two different things, and part of that fault is mine. If regional accepted number two, and that supplemental report then is produced, would that supplemental report go to council, or would it come here first on its way to council?
That would be up to staff on how they want to proceed, and a discussion with the CAO.
Okay. All right. So, I think all two can go to regional. This is probably a discussion that regional should have as well. Is everyone okay with that? I'm seeing head nods. Councillor Purdy?
Okay. So this recommendation, once we pass it, if it passes, goes to regional council to be passed again, and then. So it's right. So it's either way. Right. Okay. Yep.
Okay. So I think we're good. So let's vote on number one. So all in favor? All opposed? So that carries. Okay. The vote on number two. All in favor? All opposed? That carries. Okay. Good work, committee. Thank you, staff. So we're at 3:30. We did extend to 4, but Councillor Cuddle has to leave us. Did we want, I'm going to just look around first for nods of heads. Do we want the Regional Center Bike Network presentation? I'm seeing nods. Okay, so we'll go ahead with that. Right. A lawyer has whispered in my ear, reminding me that we need to move the motion first in this one because it's to receive a presentation. So would someone like to move that? Councillor Cleary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Transportation Standing Committee receive the staff report dated April 25th, 2025, and accompanying staff presentation as information.
Second by Councillor Morris. All in favor? Aye. All right. Now we can have the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. It's not green, but I guess it's on. Oh, it is. Good. Of design and construction in public works, and I'm here today to talk to you about how we plan to deliver our regional center AAA All Ages and Abilities network. I'll discuss work that's been completed to date, the timeline to complete the remaining work, and I'll also discuss the risks and cost implications facing the program. So the All Ages and Abilities Bicycling Network was a recommendation of the IMP plan in 2017. This plan proposed 53 kilometers of cycling facilities in a combination of protected bikeways, multi-use pathways, and local street bikeways. In HRM, we do use those three types of facilities. We do follow the NACTO and TAC guidelines when determining which facility best fits. We look at factors such as vehicle speeds, volumes, grades, the operational use, and then observed sources of bike lane distress, such as parking, access, and intersections. So to date, we've completed 29 kilometers of the proposed network, and there are 25 kilometers remain to be built, 12 of which are protected bikeways, 10 kilometers are local street bikeways, and 3 kilometers are MUPs. As I just mentioned, I'm part of a new group of dedicated project managers within the design and construction division of Public Works. And our mandate is to ensure the design and delivery of medium to complex projects throughout HRM, and the AAA network is one of the programs in our portfolio. And so our goal is to coordinate and align the project design and delivery throughout this program over the next coming years. And one of the things that it does is it gives us full accountability now for the delivery of the program. So we'll be completing the program delivery through two different mechanisms. One is our traditional in-house design and delivery mechanism, which delivers programs that are of medium to low complexity. They're designed by our in-house design staff and delivered by our construction inspection group. We meet with our design group monthly to ensure that their designs are proceeding along on schedule. We meet with the construction group in the same time frame. This is the same approach that we use when delivering more complex projects as well. The same mechanisms that we employ with our external consultants, we now apply to our in-house group to try and manage and keep them on the same schedule and to put the same sort of pressure and leverage on them to deliver. My group actively manages the more complex segments in this program. The designs are completed externally by consultants, but managed and delivered by the project managers in our group. And as I said, we meet with them regularly and follow the exact same approach as we do with our in-house. So when we thought about how we were going to deliver this and the timeframes in which we could deliver it, we sat down with our team and mapped out what the remaining segments are, where they were in the design and delivery process. And we've come up with a mechanism of delivering all of the segments through to 2028. So a series gets delivered in 25, 26, 27, and 28. There is one segment that currently lies outside of this time frame. It's Africville Road. It's scheduled to be delivered outside the time frame, mostly because of the complexities surrounding the Africville visioning process, as well as complications from the Windsor Street Exchange project. As an example, you can see our 2025 construction season program. It's currently in good shape. Several projects have been tendered. Several are in a process that we call PTR, which is pre-tender review. So that's our internal review process prior to it going to procurement. So currently we are in good shape to deliver 2025. However, you will note our bottom project at Dartmouth Harbourfront, which is currently delayed because of land acquisition with CN. That negotiation is nearing completion, but It's been in the works for a long time, and unfortunately it's outside of our sphere of influence to be delivered. But so we plan to deliver 4.4 kilometers this year. In all likelihood, I would say that Farrell Street will be started, but will likely carry over just due to utility conflicts. But overall, we're in good shape to deliver this. And so you can see the 2026 construction season is laid out in the same manner. However, it does show a significant increase in what we believe we can deliver. We're increasing to 8 kilometers. And in the future years of 2027, we plan to deliver 6.3 kilometers. And in the final year, we plan to deliver 5.6, completing the network with the exclusion of Africville Road. Like all major projects and programs in HRM, the cost of delivering this program has significantly increased. The total current cost of delivering our AAA network is now at $93 million, with an estimated $77 million yet to be constructed. I understand the original cost of the program was estimated to be $25 million, with the provincial and federal governments contributing $20.8 million. To date, HRM has billed $9.9 million, or approximately 48% of the available funding. We plan to bill out the 10.9 over the next 2 years, exhausting that funding, leaving HRM to cover the difference, which is $66 million. Again, the costs for the completion of the AAA project are really no different from any of the other construction projects that we have on the books, and they continue to increase in costs as we continue to push them out due to inflation, the labor market, and increases to material costs. Just for your reference, our own public works projects last year from 23 to 24 saw a 20 to 25% increase across the board. We do hope and expect to see it slowing down, but it is still increasing. So hence, the need to get these projects completed in a timely manner becomes more critical. So the risks to program implementation are, of course, the continued increase in costs. They will continue to escalate each year. Utility conflicts and relocations are a complication, and dealing with our partners at Halifax Water and NSPI, for instance, requires a dedicated staff time, but we've devoted that now. Land acquisition, of course, is complicated. There are several required infrastructure upgrades to support this infrastructure. Some of these are like retaining walls and such features. There is a demand for resourcing for these projects and to deliver it on this accelerated time frame. There is a need for us to actually contain scope and scope creep and keep it limited to what the AAA projects are, despite maybe there being the opportunity to expand the project to include something that's likely significant. It does increase complexity and drive the timeframes and the costs. And the final risk is, of course, decisiveness. And when we choose an option to go forward with, we have to be committed to it. And of course, ensuring that it's the correct one becomes, a very critical part of the process. So that's it, and I'll open it up now to your questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not seeing anyone on the board. I did have some questions if no one else wants to buzz in, and some comments. I think, when I think about where this project has been, it is definitely a good thing that there's dedicated staff group in charge of this, because I think expecting it to kind of be done by the AT group off the side of the desk and the work that they've always done, well, there's a reason that didn't work. I mean, we also had COVID in there, but there was a reason that didn't work. Reviewing the report and reviewing the the projects. The timelines are kind of a relief because I was worried that we were going to be missing the revised deadline, right? Because the original deadline we already missed. But it seems like that's in hand. So the two questions I have, one is about the bridge, which is a major piece of this. Because I understood that you folks would be coming to us with options on that as an interim sort of approach. That was going to happen before the municipal election, never did, and it's just kind of, I haven't heard anything since, so I'm wondering if that is still in the mix, because it shows on the schedule as the final year, and so I'm wondering if the interim option might still be in the mix, or whether we're just going to be planning that for 2028. And then my other question is, are we seeking other federal provincial programming money? Because this project really is a microcosm of the joys of working with federal provincial, where we take all the risk of every inflationary and scope creep change of everything. Their dollar amounts never change. So I'm wondering if we're seeking other programming opportunities with them. So thank you.
Thank you for the question. With regards to the McDonald Bridge, the interim solution that we had to be an at-grade solution really has been removed from the table due to complications with safety. But there's also the opportunity with the removal of the tolls. It brought about other options and available solutions that we think should be investigated, and we're currently evaluating them and developing them through a value engineering process, through which we intend to return to council with a recommended option this year. With regards to sourcing of other funding, we have applied for a funding opportunity for our significant Peninsula South project, and we will of course continue to seek other funding opportunities as they become available.
Okay, thank you very much. Just on value engineering, I think that would be the second value engineering. At some point we have to do the engineering, not just value it. So, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just feel obligated to speak for all the residents who are not in favor of the AAA bike network and the millions of dollars going into this. 66 million. I felt very sad reading this report because we are struggling with so many competing priorities in our municipality. We have, hundreds of thousands of people who will never get on a bike and go for a bike ride to work or to the store or to the local rec center. And we're spending 66 million in the next few years on bike lanes. And bike lanes are good and nice to have, but we have so many competing priorities. We need recreational infrastructure desperately for our residents. We need sidewalks desperately for our residents. We need transit upgrades and service enhancements, and we need road recapitalization projects. So this to me is a sad report, and it does not represent the needs of, I think, the majority of our residents in HRM. So I just wanted to say that, and I know this is an information report, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How to follow up on that? I'll just remind Councillor Purdy that yes, the estimate is we're going to spend $60 million more on a complete network of AAA bike facilities, but we're spending $60 to $80 million a year for the next few years just on repaving roads for cars. That's every year. Back to the topic. I am, of course, frustrated that someone who's been here since 2016 when we passed the IMP at the end of 2017, and we're looking forward to the network being completed in 2020 and then 2022 and now 2028. Specific projects and the time it takes to look at them and come back to us. Allman Street is a great example. I forget how many years ago it was now, 3 or 4 at least, came and said we could do this. And in fact, I remember going to the Almond Street engagement at the Forum, I'm going to say 6, 7 years ago. And so one of the last reports that came to us, well, actually the second last report that came to us was, hey, we can do this thing, but we can't do it on this road. It's too narrow in this section. So, you know, what do you want to do? We can just do the Liverpool local street bikeway. And we've completed a portion of Almond, which will be finished this year. Then there was a request to, oh, well, what if we made Almond one way? And then it took about 11 months for a report to come back that actually said, well, yeah, we could do that, except we'd have to do a study to look at the traffic impacts for the rest of the area. And it was kind of like, well, if I had known that, I would have put that into the motion 11 months ago and we wouldn't have lost a year. So what is your confidence level on a scale of, say, 1 to 10 that will meet the timelines in the report? I see you're calling in the big guns. Ms. Sherwood's coming up.
Mr. Chair, through to the Councillor, I'm Ann Sherwood. I'm the Director of Design and Construction with Public Works. It's been a journey to get these done. When we looked at the program, when the IP was approved in 2017, and to this day, we are still looking for national guidance in some respects on some of the facilities that Robin mentioned. And we want to make sure that we're doing them the best way that we can. There is updated guidance around accessibility in particular. With our constrained roadways and networks, we want to make sure that Almond Street, for example, is done to the very best way that we can to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our residents while providing the highest quality facility that we can. And that does take time, and that has caused some of the delay. And so we're in a much better shape than we were before. We've come a long way working with our colleagues and our stakeholders across the organization in design and construction, and project management, AT, traffic, with the CNIB and other folks to get a much better understanding of where we need to go. There are still constraints. There are still challenges. Bringing on the project management group, dedicating a program manager to the team. I hope shows council that we are committed to doing the very best that we can to get this delivered, as directed by council to deliver this program. There are still challenges in the way. So it's difficult to give it a 1 out of 10 number, to be perfectly honest. But we are, pulling out all the stops to try and get this done, to connect the network as best we can, to make best use of the funding that we have, and to deliver this network as requested by council.
And I appreciate that. And I do want to acknowledge, and I've had the chance now to meet with Robin on a couple of things, and I see Dave and Mark in the back who have done yeoman's work on this file and many other files for the last number of years. As Mr. Chair pointed out, the demands are not just, hey, build the AAA. It's also, oh, and by the way, out in Preston, we need a sidewalk. And oh, by the way, have a look down in Hubbard's. And oh, by the way. And so I know the AT staff are burdened. So I do appreciate the work, and I do appreciate the engagement with CNIB and the integration with transit. I look at the South Park bike lane and how complex that became. And the fact that we're not just striping and putting paint down and calling that a bike lane anymore. So I was hoping for a 9 or a 10. I'll accept the answer you gave, but I am going to, as I know many of us will, keep pushing to make sure that we get that, and also from our point of view, putting the money in the budget so we can continue the work.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no one else on the board, I think we can call that a wrap. There's nothing to vote on since we did that at the front. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us and all your work. So we have no motions, there's no in cameras, there's no added item. Notice, unless something happened while I was not here. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. June 12th, and that is, for anyone that wasn't in a time warp, 1:30. So we'll see you all then. I take a motion to adjourn.